Hi everybody, it's Angelina and Cavo. This is my presentation for educational psychology on moral development. So we'll start off with talking about what moral development is. So the easiest way to think about this is the reasoning or thinking behind decisions when it comes to right or wrong, and then the development stages of those decisions. So an example of this would be asking if a boy finds a wallet full of money, what would he do with it and why? So if you ask a child, what would you do with it and why, you might get an idea of where he's at in his moral development. And in the higher stages, you might have a man whose wife is dying and he can't afford to buy the medication to save her, cure her, so he contemplates stealing it. Is it right or wrong for him to steal this medication for his wife? So we have some psychologists that have, studied this throughout the years, and we have Kohlberg's theory. So Kohlberg is this guy here, um, and he had, kind of three stages or levels of moral development. The first stage was pre-conventional stage, or that level is based solely on one's own needs or perceptions. So that's stage one, where you talk about obedience orientation to obey rules and avoid punishments and bad consequences. And then you go on to stage two, it's still pre-conventional, and you're talking about rewards or exchange for orientation. And the right or wrong is determined by personal needs and wants. If I want it, then it is right. And then you'd move on to the conventional level. At the conventional level, the expectations of societies and laws are taken into account when you're making moral decisions. So being nice for a relationship, being good, and being nice, pleasing others, that's stage three. And then you go on to stage four, where you're talking about the law and order. So laws and authorities must be obeyed. So it's the social system that you are trying to maintain there. And then the final stage is the post-conventional, or they also call it the principled level. That's where judgments are more abstract, and so there's more personal principles of justice that are not necessarily defined by the laws of society. So you have a social contract orientation. That's the moral choice to determine by socially agreed upon standards. So the greatest good for the greatest number. And then the final stage would be stage six, the universal ethical principle orientation, where there are universal principles of human dignity and social justice that individuals should uphold. So it's regardless of the law and no matter what other people say or do or think. So then we can go on from there. And are you buying it? Do you see any problems with Kohlberg's theory? Any criticisms? One educational, well, she wasn't educational, but she was a feminist and she was a psychologist. It's Carol Gillian. And so her theory was more that moral development was based on self-interest starting off, and then a commitment to individuals and relationships, and then the principles of responsibility and care for all people. So this is more of a feminine based. She felt that Kohlberg philosophy or theory was, more directed towards men and a Western philosophy. So then, in reality, you got to think about it. These stages are not separate or sequenced or consistent. The reasonings behind what we do can reflect different stages simultaneously, and each decision that we make, the moral reasoning can be situational. If you think about that. So think about that a little bit. Think about if you're buying, where do you stand on it, that kind of thing. So the biggest debate about moral development, moral reasoning is gender. So Kolber says that boys are more advanced. Gillian says that boys and girls are equal, but she's more on the feminist side of caring. And then you have Gibbs, Arnold, and Burkhart. They're Team Gillian. So we have a lot of other names that you might recognize. So Froude, he says that men are quantitatively superior in morality to women. And then you have Piaget, who says that gender differences in moral development vary based on social experiences. And then we talked about Kohlberg. A better way to put it is that he supported men for an advanced level of moral development, saying that women cannot reach mature moral judgment characterized by universal moral principles related to justice and equality. And then we have Gillian, who we talked about, and she believed that both genders are capable of justice orientation and care orientation. So that's one thing to think about. Do you think that men and women can both be justice oriented and care oriented? Do you think it's one way or the other? I think that's, the big debate, so to speak, when it comes to moral development. And then you had Sko and Gudin, who found women to be more concerned with others' approval and interpersonal relationships. This was a more recent study. It was done by Naja Zulfikar. I'm not saying that right, I'm sure. But the title of her study was Analyzing Gender Invariance in Adolescence Moral Judgment with Measurement Model and a Thematic Analysis. So I thought this chart was pretty interesting to look at. There's a hierarchy here. So you see there are the moral judgment, and then we have promise keeping, truth telling, save a life, helping parents, observing law, and avoiding theft. And if you look down here, the numbers here represent boys and then girls. So if you could take a second just to look at that, we have promise keeping, and then down here, the reasons why they would keep a promise or tell the truth or save a life or help their parents or observe law or avoid theft. Kind of interesting. A lot of them are equal, but then on other reasonings, the numbers are pretty far off. So for observing law, moral duty, you see that 7 boys said that, and then 18 girls. So that's double. So if you're moving on, the findings of this study were that both qualitative and quantitative approaches, regardless of gender differences, adolescents were at the maturity stage of moral development. So the maturity stage stayed about the same, but then there were significant quantitative and qualitative gender differences in adolescence for moral judgment. So we're all in this class for teaching, and how do we apply this? So why are we learning about this? So I found this quote in another study by Colin Pennington, and it says that a curriculum designed for moral character development can provide a social environment for students to acquire personal and social values and behaviors contributing to good character and good citizenship. And then he went on to say that, because I'm in PE, so this really stood out to me, that physical educators and coaches need to help each participant develop more advanced levels of moral reasoning as well as sport-related strategies and skills in the educational system. So what he's saying that character development is equal to or leading to moral maturation. And so a teacher responsibility is to be dedicated, to be a positive role model, to value things and incorporate things such as sportsmanship to help those development stages of moral reasoning. Okay, so I really thank you for listening to my presentation. Hopefully you learned something and it made sense to you. And hopefully your gears are turning on some questions that I might have for you. And if you look here, you can find the credits. Thank you so much.